please welcome the founder and group CEO of Curiocity, Bheki Dube, and the founder and CEO of Matador Network, Borden, and the co-founder and CEO of Localeur, Joah Spearman, in conversation with senior travel tech editor Sean O'Neill.
A former mayor of Chicago once said, "You should never let a serious crisis go to waste." And what he meant by that is sometimes a crisis presents an opportunity to do things differently in a way you never thought was possible before. And so destinations coming out of the pandemic crisis have an opportunity to do a lot of things in different and better ways than before. Be better at helping to connect travelers with local communities in a more immersive way, being better about sort of dispersing travelers away from the most over-touristed destinations, being better on diversity, equity, and inclusion, broadening out the spectrum of stakeholders that they work with beyond the usual suspects, and also rethinking some concepts like the press trip in an age of new marketing channels like TikTok. That's a lot to cover, but we have an expert panel today of people who've been working for many years in travel, have a lot of interesting insights to share. We're going to go first to South Africa. Because of the internet lag, there might be a little time delay with this, but we're very grateful to Bheki for joining us, thankfully for the time difference of still joining us live. Bheki, tell us about your project, which is called Curiosity. You founded it in 2013 and you've scaled it up through 2019. What is Curiosity?
Yeah, no, thank you, Sean, for having me and everyone on Skift and the fellow panelists that have joined us today. Curiosity is basically an accommodation and experiences business. We offer spaces for people to stay as well as experience across South Africa and more medium and long term into the rest of the African continent. So really just making traveling accessible, affordable, and accompanied by well-curated experiences in ecosystems and cities that we exist in.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Bheki. Paint a picture for us of how you sort of get tourists sort of off the classic tour bus and away from listening to a standard sort of spiel about a destination, and how you'll get them sort of immersed in a place.
Yeah. So I personally believe, that we are all descendants of African griots, storytellers, writers, poets, and no matter how big of a group we become or we are on this particular platform, it all really begins with the story. So what we try and encourage people visiting South Africa and visiting the spaces that we are in is to really get off the bus, get off the car, and go beyond the mere tourist rubbernecking and really immerse themselves within the communities and the spaces that we go into. And this will range, from understanding the history, heritage of those spaces, letting local guides show these spaces, but also saying, how do you come in as a guest or as a traveler and really have an impactful play into these spaces that you come into? So these will range from either you in Soweto, where Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu had their homes, to you being in the cradle of humankind, where humanity springs from, to being in some of the coolest African cities or neighborhoods that have gone through major urban regeneration and are shaping the narrative of African entrepreneurship, art, design, and just their way of thinking and being.
That's interesting about you picked up the story, the Giro, this figure of storytelling through African tradition, because storytelling has been a big part of the summit earlier today, people talking about how can we rethink storytelling for destinations in the new era. Joah, let's bring you into the conversation. You founded Localeur, your startup, at about the same time in 2013 as Bheki did his. You began it and scaled it up through 2019. It was a great couple different products that you had, including a mobile in-destination app. And then you recently had another pivot and expansion. So tell us what Localeur is today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sean. So Localeur, it started with a really simple mission of helping travelers experience local wherever they go. I found in late 2012, when I was concepting Localeur, that it was much easier to find out where tourists go than where locals go when you're traveling. And so we started out building a community really with my friends in Austin, Texas, of sharing where they eat and drink and shop in Austin. Thousands of people come in every year for South by Southwest. So now fast forward 8.5 years, and we have locals in over 200 cities around the world. And these locals, they recommend where they get coffee, where they shop, where they eat, where they hang out. So the mission is very much the same, helping travelers experience local. And to Bheki's point about story, I think, there's so much of that happens in destination. And when we had an app, we were very much focused in destination. And now, since COVID, especially, we've gone much more earlier in trying to help that traveler start to get a sense of what type of experience they can have even before. So now we're much more in that pre-planning kind of inspiration stage. We have a subscription service that's provided through email. And so I think it's great that, people can have, someone thinking about their in-destination experience like Bheki, and then they can also look at something like a subscription to Localeur where they're thinking about things, months in advance of the trip in the pre-planning kind of inspiration stage.
It's interesting, Joah, because you're in more than 200 destinations, which is very impressive to have that network. And picking up on your point of subscription travel is something that we've covered intensively. We think the model has a real application. So very, very hot, smart trend and product that you have developed there. So if I subscribe, either on a monthly for an annual fee, what is it they do? How does the whole interaction work with Localeur?
Yeah, so historically, when people used Localeur, when we had an app, we didn't know where they were going. We didn't know how long they were going to be there. And so they would just use our app and, find a restaurant and things like that. Very much the way that people maybe use something like Yelp in the United States, or the Fork maybe. Whereas now with the email subscription, what happens is there's a form that our subscribers have access to that in essence, they can tell us about their trips, whether it's a few days out or months out, and they can be as detailed or as high level as they want to be with that description. And then within 72 hours, we provide a set of recommendations only from locals to them. And it can be an itinerary. They can have it planned out by day, or it can just be, I want a list of restaurants that I should go to. So what's really interesting is we went from a business where we were looking at our Google Analytics and seeing how many people are using us in London today versus New York. Whereas now we're looking at things like 6 months from now, where do our subscribers seem to be going? And we're seeing trends like, oh, wow, a lot of people are planning trips to New Zealand and Australia in December of this year, that type of thing.
That's very interesting, Joe. It gives you a different perspective, as you say, you move up the funnel to inspiration stage. Ross from Matador Network, you're the CEO and founder since 2006 there, and you've scaled it up. You've been having fun at the top of the funnel for a long time, and you recently introduced a new product, Matador Creators. Tell us about that, Ross.
Yeah, so we actually used to teach online college level courses in travel journalism, and we basically took that community that we started when we were sending thousands of people through our courses, and we needed contributors all over the world. So we needed very local insight at a global scale. We needed experts in hundreds of cities all over the world. So we've really built that network through our new creators platform, and now we're setting out to sort of reinvent the press trip, find the best creator for different DMOs and travel brands who want to find the best video creator, TikToker, Instagram micro influencer or influencer, writer or filmmaker, match them with the best trips and projects. And then we do a ton of our core business is branded content. So we're doing big activations with creators for, Samsung, Travel Montana, all kinds of different DMOs inside and outside of travel, brands that are travel endemic and non-travel endemic brands like Crocs, who are really big on finding creator talent. So really kind of like that platform is helping to be the bridge between matching those creators at a very local level and the brands that want to reach them and work with them.
So if I'm a small destination marketing organization and I want to sort of expand the reach from, the airlines and hotels in my neighborhood that I've tended to work with as stakeholders, and I want to do more with brands, what's a couple of examples? You mentioned Crocs and Visit Florida. What are some collaborations where the brands help expand the voice?
Well, one, we just did a program that was really a press trip, but it's turning into kind of a content activation for the tourism board of Kenya and Qatar Airways. I think that brands, especially DMOs of any size, one of their struggles is like if they find the right creator, the creator goes on the trip, creates a bunch of content, and then if they love it, they want access to that content. So we help manage that. We help a smaller creator who maybe has 50,000 followers. We're followed by over 3 million people on social. So we can amplify that content on our channels, and we can also help sort of negotiate with the creator and give those sort of smaller, scrappier DMO brands that have to do more with less, get access to some of that content that they can now use on their O&O social channels. So we're starting it as basically a free service for DMOs, especially smaller ones who want to put better creators on their fam trips and press trips. We think that fam trips is sort of a model that's needed an update for a very long time. So we're trying to change that from, a bunch of journalists on a tour bus where every second of the trip is planned and there's an overpacked itinerary, to a place where we can play to the strengths of different creators, create more and better content. Matador can amplify a lot of that on our channels, and then we can help negotiate for the DMOs with the creators and get some of the rights to that content so they can benefit on the DMOs O&O channels as well.
Okay, thanks for Ross. That helped paint a picture for me. Joe, I'd like to toss to you sort of like a thought leadership question. And then we'll get to some poll results in a second. But as a thought leadership question, I was talking with Aisha off camera before we came on, and she brought up this sort of point. It's like we're hearing throughout the day this concept of sort of immersive travel, as my colleague Lily has called it, this sense of getting beyond the canned tourism experience to something that's more local. And Localeurs, you were sort of ahead of the curve in anticipating this as a trend. But as Aisha was sort of wondering, is this a European, North American phenomenon, or is this something that people in different parts of Asia and elsewhere in the world are also sort of like in sync with and in vibe with as we're coming out of the pandemic?
That's a great question. What I would say is, even more than, I think I can see why someone would think this is a very kind of Western world, Western Europe, North America mentality, but I would actually click down into thinking this is something that it's happening at the major city destination level, where people are very much desiring to get off that kind of beaten path of tourism and experience more even in big cities like New York or Barcelona. They want to get more of that neighborhood level experience. But I think we're also now, and one of the things I've seen during COVID is that we're getting down into the rural and maybe kind of smaller urban level. For example, in the United States, one of the destinations that has really grown on our radar for Localeur has been Bend, Oregon. It's a town that maybe it already was a regional tourism market for Pacific Northwest, but we've seen in the last year and a half that markets like Bend, Oregon, or Asheville, North Carolina, these are places that during COVID, when people were maybe not able, for example, in North America, to travel to Europe or to Asia or South America, that they were trying to find these kind of almost like hidden gems, places that regionally people in Oregon knew about, or maybe people in North Carolina, but people outside of that didn't know too much about. And so I think in terms of immersive experience, I think what we're going to be seeing is people being willing to have more kind of niche experiences. And that'll happen where you have people from major cities going to smaller rural destinations, or you'll have people who, even if they do go to the major cities, they're looking for more of that neighborhood level version of the city, as opposed to, I went to New York. It's, this time I stayed in Tribeca, or this time I stayed in this part of Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. We have some poll results here. Do you think destinations will do a better job helping visitors connect with locals in the next few years? Sort of a mixed results, yes or maybe. All think that there's going to be, for sure, some improvement. Bheki, what is your take? Do you expect destinations are going to do a better job with sort of like the mission that resonates with what Curiosity is doing?
I'm struggling to hear you there again. If you could pose that question again.
Yes, I'm wondering, do you think that destinations are going to do a better job about connecting visitors with locals in the similar way to what Curiosity does?
For sure. I think, I mean, what we've seen in the context of South Africa and Africa at large is that the independent operators or independent destinations are really at the forefront in almost retelling their narrative and their story. And I think as we wake up out of COVID, the independent destinations really will lead that narrative. You know, they don't need to wait for the state or for government organizations to go and articulate their story. They're using whatever resources they have, and also from really an innate space to articulate their stories and their destinations itself. So the independent destinations are definitely really going to lead. And as travelers, both from a local, regional, and eventually from a global space point of view, as they start to return to travel, they're interested in those unique just destinations that are, one, that still have their doors open, and two, that are connected to grassroots level of how we experience just products and experiences itself.
That echoes with what we've been hearing from other tourism leaders earlier today about, you know, needing to be bold as an independent destination and try retelling the narrative of your story as you come out of the crisis. I'd like to follow up, Bheki. Earlier this year, my colleague Lily reported on how South Africa has introduced a tourism equity fund worth about $82 million in US dollars in capital. And the idea is to sort of broaden participation in the tourism sector to all ages, races, and genders beyond what is currently today an industry that at the big level is dominated by white men. What is your hope for the Tourism Equity Fund for South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very great stride by the South African government. I think for an industry that, as you say, rightfully so, well, has been very much dominated by a one linear segment of the community and is not representative of the vast just community of South Africa. And what the fund really was going to do was it was going to accelerate small, medium enterprises, Black businesses who at times do not have the right balance sheets to be able to scale, but they've got the right operational capacity. And unfortunately, that's been put on hold. We hope to contest it to a large degree and make sure that it opens up and we're able to see it really fund. I think the most important business is itself. You know, if you come on an experience anywhere in Africa, you're led by the locals. So how do we basically put this fund at the forefront to be able to really just activate potential within communities, but also build businesses that are not just pocket to mouth, you know, where you've got proper strong balance sheets, they're scalable, and they become industry leaders as well as blue chip companies like what we've seen happen with other big groups itself.
It would be very impressive if they were able to get the right structure in place and do this, because I think a lot of other countries in the world would find it as an inspirational model potentially. I'm wondering, Joah, you have over the years been outspoken about some of the gaps in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the venture capital space, and for not just for Localeur, but for all sorts of Black founders who've been trying to enter into either the tech or travel tech space. Are there any sort of practical steps that you would hope the venture capital industry could do to sort of like improve their game, level up their game?
Yeah, and that the equity fund in South Africa is just it's such a model for what should happen in a lot of ecosystems. I really do hope that other countries and destinations pursue something like that. Yeah, I think that I've been outspoken about the lack of diversity and inclusion in travel, especially because this is an industry that more than many other industries in the world reflects the makeup of it should reflect the makeup of travelers themselves. And travelers they're women, they're people of color, they're all ages. And when you look at the powers that be in the travel industry, you don't see that reflected very often the way you would maybe in, a number of other industries, whether that's consumer industries like retail or apparel, or, film even, which is amazing considering how much the film industry has been attacked over the last few years. So in a lot of ways, I think that what needs to happen on a practical level is twofold. I think one, companies that are in leadership positions need to take extra steps to bring a lot more diversity and inclusion to their recruiting and hiring and retention efforts. For example, it's hiring people of color outside of positions that have to do with diversity and inclusion. So I think that's one of the big things that all these companies need to do. And then I think the second thing on the investment front in particular, there are a set of venture capitalists and investors who frequently invest in the travel industry, and they are in a really unique position to lend space and credibility to people who don't look like the current incumbents in travel. And I think that's really important because more and more we're seeing that, the world is becoming much more diverse in terms of its demographic makeup. And investors should really, putting on that futurist hat that they often do, they should see that if they want to acquire that total addressable market that they're always talking about, or the market reach of travel, then they're going to have to find ways to find founders and founding teams that reflect these untapped markets, whether that's Black travelers, or that's travelers from South American countries traveling to North America. Rather Southern Hemisphere continents and countries going to Northern Hemisphere continents and countries, whereas typically it's the other way around. So normally it's very common to have, U.S. companies or European companies being funded to explore Asia or South America or Africa, but it's not very common to see investors supporting, founders in Africa or South America or Asia, helping travelers learn more about the opposite, right? And so I think that that's one of the things that we're going to need to see more of as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like it. So often venture capital people talk about having the 10-year long-term view, but demographic trends, exactly what you say. We need to reflect, especially in an industry like travel, where that's entirely what the whole point is. I know, Ross, that at Matador, we didn't call out how many creators are involved in the platform there or connected with you.
Yeah, the current numbers, it's growing every day, but we've got 54,000 active creators who have self-identified as writer, filmmaker, influencer, micro-influencer, producer. And that's global, that's all over the world. And it's a very international group, but, it reflects our traffic and our audience. So mostly North America, but we've got amazing coverage in pretty much the most important, 250 cities on Earth.
So if I need an expert on ceviche in Lima, Matador is the place to go. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and it's really it helps us, right? Our editorial team. It's not a social network where the creators are following each other and giving a like to each other. They're there for work. They're there to collaborate with our editors for all of our editorial content, which still makes up 96% of our content, and then the other 4% are branded content activations. But it's a help to us to get better content for Matador's site. It's also a help to our DMO and other brand partners to get better content for their brand campaigns. For example, we have even some really weird ones. I know it's a travel audience here, but we have a new project with Sherwin-Williams Paint, and they want to align travel with color and color with Sherwin-Williams. And so we're actually hiring 50 creators from 50 different states to align the color of their paint with different natural landscapes in those 50 states. So it's cool because it's not just we know exactly what we want now, who can give it to us. It's brands who kind of come up at it with an open mind, which I think is the next wave of working with creators, is brands giving a little more leeway and creative freedom to the creators themselves to say, we have a big budget here, but we need more good ideas. Help us bring this idea to life. What do you guys think we should do? And we're seeing the magic happen already. So it's pretty exciting.
That is very exciting. I will close on an audience question here. Maybe this is a good one for Joah. How do we encourage local resources in a way without sort of promoting places that have been overloved? If in an area when you have influencer accounts who have very large numbers of followers, how do you sort of have that balance to not sort of have people swarm? So if Joah or anyone wants to take that one.
Well, I'll just say this is one of the things that we've done with Localeur. We, similar to Matador in a way, we have a community of people, and we have Localeurs who started with us in Austin in 2013 when they had, let's say they had 2,000 or 3,000 followers. and they were starting out their food blogs, and now they have 80,000, 100,000 even. And while that person has been successful in building their own following, for us, that doesn't work for us, in part because we very much are very focused on authenticity, and we would rather get our content from 50 people who have 2,000 followers, and they're not engaging in situations in which maybe they're doing one post about a local restaurant and they're getting paid in the very next post to write about Wendy's or something like that. So for us, in a lot of ways, we've had to sacrifice some of our social media growth in order to stay tethered to the authenticity of our message. And so one of the things that I would recommend is for DMOs, especially in brands, sometimes it makes sense to dip down into that micro influencer level, especially even if you're giving up some of the reach of those major influencers in those markets. What you're gaining is authenticity, and you're going to be directing people to places that aren't those overloved places as they're described. So that's one of the things that we found, is that those micro influencers, you don't sacrifice any of the authenticity, even though you have to give up a little bit of the reach. And less is more in that way.
Okay, we only have 1 minute left. Bheki, in 30 seconds or so, how important is TikTok and video? Because I know for Curiosity, you've done a lot of video.
Yeah. I mean, the visual language goes far and wide, and we've been able to really, even during this time, to say, how do we still connect the curious? How do we still connect our community at a time where they can't be in physicality form with us? So the social media platforms really become quite important in that realm. But also, maybe to weigh in on what Joe was saying, I think part of the COVID experience, it's really forced the local to look within and start exploring their backyards. So we're going to see basically the locals become really great ambassadors of the untold stories in their backyards. And I think that's a great story. If we come out of COVID and the locals understand and they speak better of their backyards, that will influence the visiting guest to also really start appreciating the untold stories that are within these spaces.
Excellent point about recognizing the opportunities close to home and also the power of the visuals. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. I have to end this conversation and really appreciate it.
Thank you.